Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for being at COP. We are from Egypt, Al Sharm el Sheikh, and I think we have to appreciate everyone's hotels. Today, we are side event, Stronger Together, showcasing success of renewable energy technologies, working for the energy transition. I'm Lydia Aviles, Director of Operations of the Long Duration Energy Storage Council. And we have a wonderful panel here that is going to give us more insights on how we can be stronger together in the different alliances. So we're going to start right now with Solar Impulse Foundation, Dr. Picard.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm not here because I flew around the world in a solar-powered airplane, flying over the pyramids of Egypt. I'm here because I know that solutions to protect the environment exist and they are economically profitable. And this is why I'm so frustrated when I'm listening to the speeches in the plenary sessions. What do we hear there? We hear a long list of the problems that we all know by heart since 30 years. And then we hear this sentence, we have to do something. And we believe it's the introduction, but no, unfortunately, it's the conclusion. And then we have another speaker saying exactly the same thing. They say we have to act, but they don't explain how to act. They don't explain what to do. They don't show the solutions, and even they mix up the solutions and the goals. When we hear that getting out of fossil energy is a solution to protect the environment, it's not a solution, it's wrong. It's a goal to reach. It's a goal to obtain. And the solutions are not enough brought forward. The solutions are efficiency and renewable energies. And they go both together. Because we have also to answer to the critic that is saying that it will be too much natural resources to build and produce renewable sources. And that renewable sources will never be able to fulfill the needs of humankind. Of course, if we continue to be so inefficient, if we continue to waste the energy like hell as we are doing now, renewables will not be enough. That's for sure. And we have to know this number. About 75%, that means 3/4 of the energy that is produced in the world is lost because of the low efficiency of the infrastructures, systems that we are using today. So the two legs on which we have to walk are efficiency. It means to obtain a better result with less consumption of resources, less consumption of energy. And the other way, the other leg, of course, is renewables. With renewables, I'm not going to teach you anything. We all know that renewables are cheaper every day. And maybe this is the big difference that we can see in every COP. Things are not moving so much on the political level, but each year renewables are cheaper and cheaper. And we also have to remember that when we speak of renewables, people don't really know what it means. They know about solar and wind, because the media are speaking about solar and wind. But solar is not just photovoltaic on the roof or big solar power plants. Solar can be used on floating production systems on artificial lakes or dams. It can be also agrivoltaism, where you have agriculture and solar panels moving, opening and closing to put exactly the right amount of moisture or light on the fields. This is something we don't speak about enough. When we speak about wind energy, I think people understand quite well what is a big wind turbine, but they don't know that they can also produce energy on the edge of the roofs inside the cities with a lot of little turbines that are just taking the lift from the wind in the roads. When we speak of biomass, then it's not even as well known. Biomass, you know, it was interesting yesterday. There was a panel where I was with John Kerry, and John Kerry was saying that methane represents 50% of the problem of global warming. Well, I answered that methane is produced from waste from agriculture, from farming, from landfills, from the oil and gas companies. And if you recover that methane and turn it into biogas, it can fulfill 20% of the needs of energy for the entire world. So we always have to explain much more about what we're doing. Biogas is one of the forgotten renewable energies in this world. And hydroelectricity, people know about it, but they don't understand that it's also a completely renewable source. And here we're fighting against other enemies. With hydroelectricity, we're not fighting against the oil industry. We're fighting against the green activists who don't want to increase the height of the dams or don't want to have pumping storage, like we will hear later, as a long storage capability for renewable energies. So we also have to explain what is hydroelectricity. And of course, geothermia. Then when you speak of geothermia, you listen to the people who are so afraid of earthquakes because there has been one earthquake somewhere by drilling 3,000 meters deep and putting some pressure. You had a few vibrations and everybody started to panic. But geothermia is not only deep drilling, it's also very shallow drilling, allowing to install heat pumps for big buildings in the center of the cities, and not only heat pumps for individual houses in the suburbs or in the countryside. So we see that we are speaking with, we can put the next one, yeah, thank you. We're speaking today about a fantastic field of development that brings together finance, economy, efficiency, technology, politics, and we are not full of people in this room. How is it possible? Here there are 20 people that are all convinced of what everybody here is going to say. But this message should be much more heard in the COPs. Because actually there are two COPs. There is the COP of the people negotiating against problems, creating resistance, opposition, thinking that fighting climate change is going to be detrimental for their economic development. And there is the other COP, like this one here, where we know exactly what are the solutions, how profitable they are, and how they can be used to give hope and to move forward. So we have, as the last slide I wanted to show, we have at the Solar Impulse Foundation contributed to this cause by identifying more than 1,000 solutions that exist today that are economically profitable, that protect the environment, that develop all the economy of the countries who need more development, access to energy, access to technology. We made a guide of solutions for cities. Well, this is one contribution. You are all contributing to this type of actions, but we have to be heard much more, dissipate the misunderstandings around what we do, inform much better, and be much more clear. Renewable energies is not only for the climate, it's also because it makes economical sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Picard. It's mesmerizing to see more than 1,000 solutions, and I think we all agree that we are already convinced, and that's why we are here. So let's spread the words a little bit more. The next speaker that we have is Julia Souther from the Long Duration Energy Storage. Apologize, that's my fault. International Solar Energy Society. Sorry.
Do you want to take any questions? Does he have some? That's up to you.
Do you want to take some questions?
You want to take questions?
I'm happy to take questions.
Because we have a time constraint that Dr. Picard has to leave, we would like to open a little bit of questions and answers if someone in the audience would like to.
If you have questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer. Yes? You have a comment. Good idea.
So you said everyone in the room is convinced already about renewables. I'm coming from a different sector. I don't know much about renewables, but it seemed like a good talk to come to tonight. And I just want to thank you for your efforts and enthusiasm. I was grabbed as soon as I came in here, and now I'm interested to Google this out and research. And I feel like I'm a closer believer into renewables than I was before I walked in. So thank you so much for your time.
That's good. You deserve all the applause. I'm so happy to hear that.
Thank you.
Yes? You want to come closer and get the mic?
Hello, Dr. Picard. We met in New York City several years ago. It's great to see you still doing your work and representing so many solutions. My name's Alan Bigelow, and I work for Solar Cookers International. And so I wanted to just stress that side of the solar. You mentioned a number of solar solutions, but solar thermal, as applied for cooking, can save money, and it's also friendly for the human being who is cooking and also for the environment. We have data that shows that. And I just wanted to hear your perspective of solar thermal and whether or not this is a viable solution worldwide, and have you witnessed and seen some of those solutions as how they could be helpful for the home, the single household level?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the solutions in the 1,000 solution list is a solar panel that makes at the same time thermal and photovoltaic, which is, I think, a good compromise for that. Now, I would say in industrial countries, what I always learn, but maybe it's wrong, the efficiency is better if you produce the electricity with photovoltaic, and then you use this electricity to heat water, because you can either heat water or put the electricity on the grid. But in the developing countries, where you don't have this possibility to do both, then thermal is really important for all the cooking and for all the appliances and things like that. So I think here again, there are a lot of different applications. And of course, on a lot of roofs, it's important to make hot water directly with thermal. So depends where, depends how, but both are really important.
Thank you so much.
We still have time for questions?
Yes.
Okay.
One more.
I continue. I love questions, so just stop me when you want.
Hi, my name is Ben Reed. I'm from Scotland. We're looking today at wind and solar to showcase the strength of these technologies in decarbonizing grids. In the past, the technologies that have decarbonized grids the most have been nuclear-based. France decarbonized their electricity grid, Sweden and Ontario. No major countries with populations over 10 million have got to low carbon using solar and wind yet. Why not look to the past and think about using nuclear energy? Why not look to the past in the last 50 years to look at the past for examples of decarbonized grids and look at the example of nuclear energy?
Thank you.
Nuclear energy, is it renewable energy or not? Well, maybe you answer yourself when you say, why not look at the past? if you consider nuclear power as the past, maybe. It's true that if you look at the price of nuclear electricity, it is 4 times more expensive than solar. The world record for solar energy is in Portugal, 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Unbeatable by any other source. So I know that nuclear power is decarbonized or partially decarbonized. Nothing is completely decarbonized. It is something we have today that is much better than coal. So I fully agree that it is not reasonable today to dismantle the nuclear energy and open coal mines or reopen coal mines like in Germany. But if we look at the real cost of energy, especially for developing countries, it's very clear that renewables are much cheaper. And what they allow also is something I didn't say in my speech, but with renewable energies, you can delocalize the production to all the regions that have no access to electricity. So instead of having a big nuclear power plant with power lines that never reach everybody and cost a fortune to do, you can make the solar or the wind or biomass or small hydro or even small geothermal very locally, decentralized, and this creates jobs, this creates an economical development and doesn't need any big infrastructure. So these are the type of things we have to take into consideration also in the COP27, which is, as it is called, the COP for Africa, because it's not only for rich countries who can afford a nuclear power plant.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your wisdom. You were about to applaud. Sorry, I interrupted.
No.
Yeah.
I think it's time for the other speakers, and Julie has an airplane to take, so I don't want to monopolize the microphone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have International Solar Energy Society, Robert Jomberg.
Should I stand here and control my own slides, or? Is that all right? Okay. All right. Oh, thank you for that. It's off. Thank you for that presentation. That was really inspirational. I happened to see a demonstration of that PV and thermal solar panel last month up in Germany at our conference up there. So thanks again. Robert Jungberg. I'm representing the International Solar Energy Society, board member, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here and present to you people here at the COP27. So I can figure out how to do this. There we go. I think I'm on the same. There we go. Just a little bit of information about the International Solar Energy Society. We were formed in 1954, and we put out the Solar Energy Journal since about 1960. It's the premier publication for research on solar energy from the global laboratories and universities, and it's a really pleasure for me and a privilege to represent them here today. A couple things just to draw your attention is in October we're going to have our Solar World Congress conference in October, like I said, in New Delhi, and then the year after that we do our Eurosun again. This time we'll be in the Hagues, and so please check us out if you can and like to join us. I just might to mention that the Solar Energy Journal I mentioned is subscription if you're a member, but Solar Energy Advances is a free publication for anybody, and also encourage you to tune in to our solar our webinars every month, and they're also free. We put them on for the International Energy Agency and the Solar Heating and Cooling Organization. Okay, most of you have seen this slide before, but it's a good reminder that if we would have taken action back in 2007, we wouldn't be in quite so much trouble now. And of course, now we have a long ways to go and a lot of work to do. A huge area under that curve, and right now with the individual contribution by the various countries, their stated contributions. We are pretty much well on the road to 3 degrees centigrade if we don't take some drastic action. Just another reminder that fossil fuels does contribute over 90% to the CO2 in the atmosphere. Land use is about around 5%. And so we really need to attack and address that fossil fuel issue. Fortunately, the cost of solar and wind has dropped dramatically, particularly the solar. It's getting down there, very competitive and actually cheaper than almost any fossil fuel power generation for electricity. It's just pretty much global, worldwide, that the solar and wind as a combination are cheaper than any fossil fuel. And this gives you an example of what's been happening over the last 10 years or so with solar. Back in 2007, we couldn't even hardly find solar on the map as far as its contribution. Wind had a pretty decent contribution. But now, last year, over 75% of the new production that was constructed for electrical generation was either solar or wind. And particularly solar, as you can see in that graph, is growing significantly and really even over wind. It's a really welcome change in just a matter of about 15 years. Just amazing, okay? This is it. This global here, this graph is interesting in the sense that in just 10 years, solar was only about maybe 5 gigawatt production in the installed capacity in the world, and now it's over 1,000 currently this year. That's a 20-fold increase in only 10 years. And that ramp up seems to be growing faster and faster. It's not slowing down at all. Particularly important is you may look there at the green and yellow part of the chart, and that's China and the Asian Pacific area. You might know that area of the world, India, China, Indonesia, et cetera, represents about 50% of the population in the world. And right now they're doing about 40–50% of PV capacity installation, so they're really keeping up their end of the bargain. The Americas and Europe are doing really well. And you can see the small green one at the top, the Middle East and Africa chart, part of the chart. They have a great opportunity to drive that. And of course, that's one of the reasons why the COP27 is held here in Africa this year, to encourage that. There's going to be a lot of action in the next few years. That's really important for 2 reasons. One is just to meet the existing need of economic and electrical energy needs for everybody in Africa, but also the growing population and the new growth is a really important one. I saw one report saying that about 50% of the population growth between now and 1950 will be in Africa. So there's a huge need there, not only just for the existing electrical consumption, but also for future populations. The next speaker will talk about storage. It's really critical. If we're really going to do this renewable energy for the power industry, we need to have a lot of storage. The price has dropped dramatically. I think just in the last 6 or 8 years, it's dropped. I have the number right there, but I'm sure you'll probably cover it. But the installation has grown over tenfold in just about the last 5 or 6 years. So we got a lot to go there. I might add that I mentioned our seminars that the International Solar Energy Society does. A couple months ago, we did a seminar on what would it take to do 100% renewable energy. And it was focused primarily on storage. And it needs to grow by probably about 100 times between now and 2050 as far as storage capacity. Right now in the United States, for example, this storage is almost all hydro storage for hydroelectric generation. I think about 90% of it is in the form of water storage. So we'll hear more about that in a few minutes. This is a chart from IRENA. They did a map of what would it take to meet the 2%, excuse me, the 2 degree centigrade goal. And we'll need to put in about, it looks like about 86% of solar, wind, and other sources to meet that goal. And then the installed capacity the same way needs to grow at least probably about 75%. And we're on the path actually to meet that. But it'll take a few years to do that. Most of the time we talk about solar, but there's 2 things. One is to meet the existing need to replace fossil fuel fired generating plants, closing down the coal and the gas and so on. And then also to meet that increased need for economic growth and population growth. But the third thing I'm going to talk about real briefly is the need to prevent the extremely costly carbon capture and sequestration activities that are starting now, and they're very expensive, and I'll talk about that in a moment. A lot of you are familiar with this Keeling curve. It's almost 60 years of CO2 monitoring on the top of Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii. And actually, I've been there in the mid-'90s. I saw that building over there. I was wondering what it was, but my son and I were up there snowboarding in Hawaii. We had to go snowboarding in Hawaii, so that was why we were up there. But I don't know if there's much snow up there anymore. It's over 4,000 meters, over 14,000, almost 14,000 feet up there. But the question is, what does it mean when you see those parts per million? It's 415 in mid-October. Now it's about 417. And what does it mean every time it goes up 1 point? What does that really mean? 1 carbon in the atmosphere, what does that mean, 1 point? Well, a good friend of mine, Maury Wolfson, and another associate at the National Center for Atmospheric Research came up with a number saying that if that goes up 1 point, that's 8 billion tons of carbon in the atmosphere. That's a lot, okay? And remember that's the amount of carbon that's above what the natural processes in the Earth can handle. Right now, typically the Earth generates about 100 billion tons of CO2, and the natural processes reduce that. But now with human actions, we're putting an extra 8 to 10 billion tons of carbon in the atmosphere, and that's upsetting the whole process. So what the 1 billion tons, again, what is that? Well, if it takes $100 per ton to remove that from the atmosphere, that's $800 million, or let's just round it up to $1 trillion. Well, that curve you showed earlier, that's actually going up a couple points every year. So that's $2 trillion if we were we'd have to spend if we want to try to remove that from the atmosphere out of carbon capture and carbon sequestration and direct air capture and so on. That is a huge amount of money. That's a huge liability for our people in the future and even today. So how do we address that? The most important thing, of course, is install solar and wind, and it will prevent that huge financial obligation in the future. And again, the number I was using was $100 a ton. Well, right now the federal government in the U.S. is paying $187 a ton for demonstration projects, almost twice as much. IPCC, on one of their articles, said it could be as high as $500,000 to $3,000, $10,000 a ton to remove it by 2050. We're talking about astronomical numbers. Okay, hopefully we won't get there, but that's the concept that when we make a decision, we should be making that decision is, okay, how little we have to spend now versus having to spend such a huge amount in the future to fix the problem. I think we're all aware that we like to spend a little bit of money now to save huge problems in the future. Most of the time now, energy decisions are made on the levelized cost of energy. You know, is it levelized cost of energy for natural gas or coal or whatever? What is that cost? But the concept here is the levelized cost of carbon abatement. And the Columbia, it's the Columbia Center for Global Energy Policy, et cetera, has done some studies on that. And really low cost, say trees and so on, is like $1 or $2 per ton, but of course they take a long time to grow, et cetera. Utility scale solar is maybe $30 to $60 a ton to prevent carbon in the air. And rooftop solar, because small scale and so on, is a little bit higher. And industrial applications, which is a really hard nut to crack, it could be up as $100 to $200 a ton that you'd need to spend now to prevent, $500 a ton later. So I want you to just think of that concept as far as how to make decisions. So our takeaway message is, of course, is renewables making tremendous progress. And of course, we need to have a lot more effort in that whole area in terms of renewables and heating and cooling, and particularly in the transport sectors, electric solar PV for electric cars, et cetera. And of course, the most important thing is political action and funding. It always comes back to that. Okay, so again, the three items is, of course, using solar and wind to abate and mitigate existing CO2 atmospheric emissions, make sure that doesn't happen. And then providing new clean energy for economic and population growth is really critical. And my last note there is to avoid major costs of carbon capture and sequestration in the future. So again, thank you for the International Solar Energy Society. If you'd like to track us down, it's really simple. It's just ises.org. And love to have you check us out and participate. And don't forget our don't forget our conferences in New Delhi in October. Love to have you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. That was very inspiring. Now we have our speaker from the Long Duration Energy Storage Council, Julia Souther.
Thank you, Lydia. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see all of you. Thank you for making the time to come here and hear about goals and solutions. And if those last slides didn't motivate you enough, looking at we're past the 400 parts per million, we've got to work together. We've got to start doing this now, today. There's no time to waste. And as we're sitting here with air conditioning that we don't need. So, it's amazing that there's a pavilion here from Ukraine. And when I went and saw the pictures, there were pictures that just happened a few days ago of missile attacks on solar fields. And it just really was a wake-up call to the energy transition at hand, and really wanted to highlight, again, the importance of tying together not just the motivating factors to push us to start acting on the solutions that we have in our hands, but to really look at how this transition is part of energy security discussions, and how we're looking at not just energy security, but affordability, access. These key themes and that you're hearing on flexibility, affordability, reliability, and access can happen today with the technologies available. We have solar, we have wind, we have biomass, we have nuclear, we have a lot of components. What's not really known or understood is the value out of long duration energy storage. The two legs that were mentioned earlier, long duration energy storage could be in that efficiency side, because it makes renewables work every hour of every day, every week, every month. And really want to highlight that, we've seen a lot of graphs on the trajectory of how we're going to get to 2050, and the increase of the solar and wind, the scaling up that is at hand that we have to do. It really is looking at the entire ecosystem. We're looking at decarbonizing industry, transportation, aviation, electricity, agriculture. So many different components is that we really need to see that we're using existing infrastructure like the power grid, but we're also building new types of structures that could be decentralized and kind of microgrids or new types of creative thinking to build upon. And so what we really want to demonstrate is that when you get to an implementation rate, this thing has a mind of its own. It's all about duration here. When you get to a point of integration of renewable energy at 60 to 70%, you see the costs start coming down. The solar trajectory that we've seen in the last 10 years, with solar prices starting really high in the hundreds, coming down to the cents, we're seeing the same thing happen with storage, and especially long duration energy storage. So really want to highlight again that as we're integrating renewable energy, you're really needing long duration energy storage to give you that flexibility and that energy shifting. So when you don't have the wind and you don't have the solar, but you want that clean energy, you need long duration energy storage to provide that grid balancing. And you need it to actually give you new infrastructure. You don't always have to build new transmission lines. You can use storage as a transmission asset. And you can also look at different ways to really approach the policy directions that we need. So what's really thrilling about long duration energy storage, it's not just a box. There are many different attributes that can be really provided to address this flexibility concept. So I mentioned infrastructure, looking at different types of electricity grids, microgrids, looking at different tools. There's a lot of discussion about contracts between companies and a power purchase agreement. Well, this could be modified to be a 24/7 clean power purchase agreement. So you actually have the wind and solar every hour because you have long duration energy storage filling in those gaps that have been traditionally filled with fossil fuel. It's also thrilling that, we're in Africa and we're looking at remote systems. A lot of the mining industry is moving to decarbonize. And so as they do this, they need that certainty that they're going to have clean energy show up every day. And whether it's with power or whether it's with thermal energy storage, there are tools that can make this happen. So it's really exciting to be here on our year anniversary. At COP26, the Long Duration Energy Storage Council really wanted to focus in on the messaging of flexibility and how we can actually really work with solar and wind to provide that clean, firm power and clean, firm heat. So we launched our net zero power report, and I can get to that a little bit in a minute, but about the $3 trillion market for long duration energy storage. And at this COP, we launched our net zero heat report and the importance of clean, firm heat, thermal energy storage, whether it's district heating, whether it's for agriculture, whether it's for aluminum refinery. The fact that you can use thermal energy storage to give you that capacity that you need to make sure you can keep the lights on and power your homes and give you the heat and cooling that you need. And so as you see, our membership is very diverse. We have technology providers giving you the types of long duration energy storage, and we also have companies that want to buy the long duration energy storage or build it or finance it. And so with this perspective, bringing global executives together, we want to provide fact-based information for society's benefit, because the more emissions we get off the grid, the healthier we'll be. And we're really focusing on all 4 types of long duration energy storage: thermal, mechanical, chemical, and electrochemical. And this is something that's really unique that we've been constantly updating on our website, is to see that within each type of long duration energy storage, there is diversity of projects, whether they're small scale that can be in a remote system behind the meter. There's also large scale that can be pumped hydro or compressed air with thermal energy storage, or liquid air or concentrated solar power. It's really, again, this nexus of opportunity. And we really want to highlight that we need this diversity of technologies to meet the needs we have globally. And so these are the 4 reports that we've done, and they're on our website. We're just really excited to demonstrate the importance of having the market share, being able to look at a policy toolkit with 20 different types of recommendations, looking at this nexus to use existing tools and modifying them to adapt our needs today. And again, having conversations about how LDOS is that missing puzzle piece, how long duration energy storage does de-risk this transition. So this was from our first report back in November last year, highlighting that when you bring in the renewables at 60%, you get the cost savings, you get the emissions reductions, and you get the $3 trillion marketplace. When you see this 24/7 policy report, we also are demonstrating that we can get long duration energy storage down to $100 a megawatt hour. That is cost competitive today. And so we're demonstrating that we've got this opportunity to amplify the message of using traditional tools and making them better with long duration energy storage. We're creating a global certificate process with various global coordinations and organizations. The partnerships are really important to implement this. It's another incentive to say, okay, if you want to reach 60% renewables, that's great. You can get a bronze medal. But if you want to reach 100% integration with long duration energy storage, you get a platinum medal. And this means a lot more. And this actually can really help in regulatory conversations and changing public policy. Changing public policy is a huge part of our dialogue. We don't lobby, but we want to do a lot of education and awareness because long duration energy storage is essential to meeting our decarbonization goals. These are 20 different types of policy changes that can be made today with the themes of long-term market signals, whether it's revenue mechanisms or whether it's direct technology like grid planning, carbon tax, mandates like the ones that have been recently announced in the EU, the US, and Australia, asking for anywhere from 5 to 25 gigawatts of long duration energy storage. And this has been kind of a hot topic because it really merges together some really new information that hasn't been seen before about the benefits of thermal energy storage. And again, if you're looking at the emissions around the world, about 50% comes from thermal energy storage provided by fossil fuels. And as we need to transition, we want to show that you can have up to $550 billion of savings a year with thermal energy storage. And so we did a lot of work with modeling with our members and working with McKinsey as our knowledge partner to demonstrate that this market just went from a $2 to $3 trillion marketplace to over a $4 trillion market when you have power and heat. You can make this clean, firm, and it's really important to see that you can actually do this in partnerships. I mentioned that how much of the global emissions, transportation, cooking, district heating, buildings, industry comes from fossil fuels, and this is why it's so important to change this to thermal energy storage. And again, just wanted to highlight these cost savings. I mean, today a gas boiler, is anywhere from $40 to $65 megawatt hour, and when you bring in thermal energy storage using wind or solar, you have the costs that are cheaper than natural gas. This is today. This is why we're saying with long duration energy storage and renewable power, you can replace fossil fuels. This combination is your new baseload. We have to start changing the conversation if we really want to meet the goals and the targets. Long duration energy storage with renewable energy can replace fossil fuels and do it in a cost-effective way. You can find this all on our website too. It's just published last week. And so I always like to talk about stories and connect us all with humans around the world of what we're working on. We wanted to bring 4 business cases to life, and we looked at creating green steam, and we gave you a range saying that, well, if you're going to do thermal energy storage, you need to look at 100 degrees Celsius up to 2,000 degrees Celsius. Fossil fuel traditionally can provide this. Long duration energy storage with thermal energy storage can provide this and replace it. We looked at replacing gas boilers, again, with thermal energy storage. We looked at district heating. A lot of urban cities and rural cities want to know how they can do heating and cooling. Look at Europe this winter. There's a lot of fear about how this is going to be met. If there was more long duration energy storage technologies in the grid today and in the infrastructure, we wouldn't be asking these questions. We also want to talk about aluminum refining, steel. You can do this with long duration energy storage. You get that stability and that certainty because you can provide that every hour of every day with long duration energy storage. And what's also exciting is that if you want to look at off-grid applications, agriculture, greenhouses, they need power, they need heat, they need cooling. This can now also be provided with long duration energy storage. And so again, we talk a lot about costs. We should also be talking a lot about savings. And so what's really exciting to see just in the thermal energy storage area alone, that $540 billion globally is a huge amount of savings. And this is just the beginning. So we really want to show that this really helps with making sure we don't waste power. We really capture every ounce of solar and wind, and we really put it to use. And in closing, just again to highlight the importance of long duration energy storage, it is a key partner in meeting our net zero targets. When you're looking at the power sector, when you're looking at the heat sector, and when you're looking at the hydrogen sector, all of these are parts of long duration energy storage. And yesterday, working with the Global Solar Alliance, the Global Wind Energy Council, the Green Hydrogen Council, the International Hydropower Association, and the International Global Thermal Association, we all came together and wrote an MOU to say, look, we're going to start working together more so that we can actually show changes and differences today. We have to. And so we are also, one of the first steps is to create a planning organization, internationally start coordinating how we better plan and bring this nexus together to give the full benefits. So look forward to working with all of you. Hashtag LDES, new thing of COP. Very excited to talk with you. And again, thank you for your time and motivation to really incorporate the value add of the missing piece of long duration energy storage in partnership with renewable energy to meet our carbon goals.
Thank you, Julia. I know you have to catch a plane. And I was wondering, do you want to take one question? Is there someone in the that would like to have the question?
This is my favorite part too.
Hello. So I wondered which organization or which company do you recommend from your partner ones if we want to import the technology? My name is Batul and I'm from Lebanon in the Middle East.
It's nice to meet you, and thank you for your question. So we have a very diverse group of companies. So we have companies that are, some are startup, taking a traditional idea of pumped hydro and flipping it on its head and looking at different types of integration with long duration energy storage. We have other technologies that are looking at a diverse range of batteries, flow batteries, zinc, iron ore, vanadium. We're looking at a lot of existing technologies that have been around for decades, like pumped hydro, concentrated solar power, and others. We have organizations that are now in 20 different countries and working on projects in a variety of different areas. And some of these companies are spending a lot of money with pilots and demos and commercialization, and other companies are trying to help build the projects or just amplify the message that, look, we're buying this. I mean, so there are tech providers, there are traditional fossil fuel companies that are also investing money because they know they have to change. They are now looking to say, like, we have a partnership with the mining group. We can't do this anymore. We need to actually find a way to get our, meet our goals. And we want to hold them accountable to this because, this is really important. And so it's this diverse perspective of bringing the marketplace together. And we are growing and very interested in new members joining us and more partners to collaborate because we can't do this alone.
Hi, so I'm Lenika Roden, representing the Jamaican government. I'm actually Director of Energy Systems and Conservation. So my question is surrounding the fact that in the Caribbean, we have been growing a lot in terms of our renewable energy industry. Particularly, we have a lot of focus on the solar energy production. One of the challenges that we actually have is storage, which is why I was so drawn to your presentation. I wanted to see if there was any possibility for us to collaborate and on the standpoint from the government in terms of how can we incorporate storage standardization in our policies going forward.
Wow, it's great to meet you too, and thank you for your question. A couple things. With our membership, we create working groups. So we have a working group for transmission distribution for net zero heat. There's a lot of interest by our working groups to do net zero islands. It's a huge part of the transition, and so some of our technologies can be put in buildings, infrastructure, but to provide heating and cooling and use the solar or wind or geothermal. So there are definitely technologies today that we can use and adapt. We've also had a lot of our companies work with areas that have been either hit by hurricanes or flooding or tornadoes or a natural disaster, droughts and freezes. So we can also be part of the solution. I think looking forward to working with you on the diversity, again, of technologies that can be used in a variety of scales. The second point of policies, our policy toolkit can be adapted around the world. We had global input on this, and it's not a cut and paste, it's an adapt to the local community that needs it. And so it is really important to have that regulatory certainty to get the financing, and it's also really important to have the consistent mandates. So every year, here's a 5-year, a 10-year, and this partnership to work together to show that you need all the renewable energy and the storage to give you the reliability and certainty that you need. So very excited and look forward to working with you more. There's a Green Islands convention that I know that's happening in February, and there is a group that I'll work with you on in the Caribbean working on a collaboration of storage, wind, and solar. We'll connect offline, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
And now you have to go. All right. You also have to. Okay, I think if you want to give the applause before they leave, because we are going to continue with our speakers. Okay, we're going to continue in natural order, finally. Now we go back to International Solar Energy Society. This time we have Mohammed Helmi. Please.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's a pleasure talking to you today. I'm Mohammed Helmi, Egypt country manager from BayWa IRE, which is part of the International Solar Energy Society. I'm here to speak about a technology that's slowly gaining traction, floating PV. And we see a lot of people speaking about it, technology being implemented with around 4 gigawatts of installed capacity of floating PV globally. A quick overview on BayWa RE. We are a company with headquarters in Munich, active in the renewable energy market for the past 13 years, since 2009, and have offices in 29 countries and employees around more than 4,000 employees at the moment. We have around 4.5 gigawatts of installed capacity in solar and wind, and over 20 gigawatts of capacity in the pipeline. We operate more than 10 gigawatts globally and have 7 gigawatts of direct marketing portfolio. We have over 100 locations in these 29 countries and are active, as I said, in solar and wind in these regions. So getting to the floating PV technology, for you who are not familiar with the technology, it's basically solar panels installed on structure that are floating on water bodies. We use, of course, special material to be able to be durable, like long-lasting steel structures and HDPE floaters. The sidewalks where we use the floating structure to be able to maintain the floating system are very stable, and we install everything on these floaters, including inverters, including transformers, to be everything on the water body, and then transfer the electricity using the cables. We use glass modules to be able to have a lot of sun getting to the water body, and the water cooling, the cooling that's coming from the water even gives more efficiency for the system compared to ground-mounted normal solar systems. Anchoring is an important issue that we are focusing on, and we developed several ways of anchoring depending on the topology of the bottom of the lake, and depending on the lake itself. We have onshore anchoring, nearshore anchoring, and bottom anchoring, depending on the size and the depth of the lakes. And what's important to mention here as well, as PV, floating PV can install on lakes, but as well on dams, reservoirs. It's possible to install it on reservoirs that have a variation of up to 30 meters in water, because this is very important as well in the installation. A quick overview, we have around 200 megawatts of installed capacity globally, and the largest just commissioned last year of 41 megawatts in the Netherlands. And the beautiful thing about floating solar, which I really like, is from the shore, as you can see in the top left, it's almost invisible to the eye to see from the shore, that it's not really impacting the way the lake looks. As I mentioned, the glass modules gives high transparency and lets a lot of light passing through the panels to the lake itself. And anchoring below, as you can see, makes it not visible to the eye where the anchors are exactly, if it's bottom anchoring. And the straight lines of the modules makes a stable way of maintaining, which is, of course, a very important issue in any installation, the maintenance and operation of these systems. The floating transformers themselves are kept safe on the floaters, and we have a VDE certificate from Germany for the designs that we have. Of course, for any new technology, it's important to understand what are the environmental impact of the technology on the habitats that we are installing them on. So lakes, water bodies, we have fish, we have grass, plants that are in the waters, so we need to understand what are the environmental impacts of these. And therefore, we conducted several studies on the systems that we've installed, like for example this one in the Netherlands, where we did a 10-month study to understand how much oxygen is dissolved in the water, the temperature and the electrical conductivity of the water compared to open water and underneath the floating panels. And the results show that there is no negative impact on all three indicators, but even positive change and positive impacts on the habitat that we are installing them on. As we can see, so the oxygen levels are similar to open water systems, and there is no temperature difference underneath the panels compared to open water. But the positive thing is as well that the variations of temperature underneath the panels, they change slower. So the difference from hot to cold, it appears slower than on open water areas. So the angle that I want to show as well from floating PV and the importance of it environmentally is the water savings that we are achieving using these systems. So we are in a region in the Middle East, in Egypt and in Africa, where water, I don't need to highlight how important water is and the water crisis and security issues that we have with water. And one of the positive environmental impacts of the floating solar systems is the savings on water evaporation. So as you can see, compared to open water areas, the evaporation is decreased between 40 and 60% underneath floating PV systems. And this is a very big number. And this is very important to understand, because a lot of countries are aiming into installing systems of water desalination to be able to get fresh water. But with these systems, we can achieve more savings on the evaporation and use the fresh water that we naturally have. So on a ratio of 0.6 hectares per megawatt peak, we have a saving of water with around 8,000 cubic meter per megawatt peak per year. And as we are in a host country of Egypt for the COP, we did a case study on Egypt, and we used only lakes that are larger than 10 hectares with a coverage ratio of 30%. The idea behind it is to be able to use the rest of the lake for the uses that, like fishing, transportation, that has been used before, and not to hinder these. And with a capacity of 1.5 megawatt per hectare, we reached a capacity in Egypt for 368 gigawatt peak, using only 30% of the water bodies that we have. And looking at Lake Nasser, which is one of the largest man-made lakes globally, and installing only 30% of floating solar on the surface, we reach up to 2.3 billion cubic meter per year of water savings from evaporation. This is of course a huge number, and if we calculate how much it would cost us to get it from water desalination, we see that it's a very, very big number, having around 75 to 80 cents per cubic meter from the water desalination plants. So I guess the message is we need to be open for new technologies and not only look at solar, as was mentioned before in one of the discussions, as only electricity generation systems, but also look at their other positive impacts on the environment and how we can use it in a more broader way. And this is only one example of the different technologies that we are using. So from here, I hope that we can act and in our region start using this technology also to save water in the region and the countries that we have. Thank you very much, and happy to get your questions in the Q&A session.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. Yes. So we have our next speaker from the World Wind Energy Association, Stefan.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Let me see if I can get to the right slide. Yes, I'm going to talk about the possible contribution of bioenergy for the energy transition. Bioenergy is not so often mentioned when we're discussing about renewable energy, and that's missing an important point, and that is that bioenergy currently is the largest global source of renewable energy, and will continue to play an important role simply because it is available in so many places around the world. If we look at the net zero scenario, it was already mentioned today of the International Energy Agency. What we can see is that they believe that the contribution of bioenergy should increase considerably, but they also mention that the use of the traditional use of bioenergy as firewood or as charcoal should decline as fast as possible, because the traditional use of bioenergy is in many ways unsustainable. It is polluting, it's creating serious health impacts, and areas like, for example, in Africa, it is contributing to deforestation. So that's an important point, and that is also why we want to focus as a World Bioenergy Association, particularly on this topic, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. First of all, let's see what are the sources of bioenergy use of the future. And what you can see is, you see this yellow bar getting really big. The yellow bar, that's organic waste streams. That is material that we don't use for the time being. That's straw, agricultural wastes of any kind that are currently burned in the fields, discarded, plowed in, not used. And I think that is one thing to really look at. There is an incredibly large potential, actually billions of tons of biomass that are not being used right now, that are left to decay, and when they decay, they release the CO2 anyway. So it doesn't help letting them to decay. So this is the picture of the future in 2050, painted by the International Energy Agency, and you can see solar, bioenergy, wind, they're all at the same level. They're all going to make an important contribution, and they're going to we need all three of them to play together to solve our issues. The benefits that bioenergy has, one is that it is a very low-cost energy storage. We are very often forgetting about that. If you have, yes, a liter of ethanol, it stores energy for a long time without any loss, and it would require a pretty big battery to store the same amount of energy. So it's a chemical energy storage that is very cheap. The second one is there are solutions for all energy sectors, but most importantly for the heat sector. Using biomass for heat can be very efficient because we don't need to transform another source of energy into electricity first. We can go straight from the biomass to the heat. And that's why I want to talk a little bit about green cooking, because this is particularly relevant in the African context. So what is green cooking about? It's about two technological transformations. It's about transforming the technology of the cook stove and about transforming the fuel from a raw material, from firewood, from charcoal, to densified biomass from agricultural residues. Typically in the form of pellets, could also be in the form of small briquettes. And if you combine these two technologies, you arrive at a situation that is much better than what we are having right now. You can see here the picture of a burning clean cook stove. It looks like if you would fire gas. And it is truly a gas fire because you're gasifying the biomass and you're burning the gas. So you get an entirely clean combustion. If you look at the emission values, these green cook stoves, they are like probably 90% lower or 95% lower in emissions than the typical three-stone fire that people are cooking on throughout the world. 3 billion people are using these, 3 billion women are using these traditional technologies, and their lives could be really improved by this technology. What is also important is to see that this is affordable. Using densified residual biomass is among the most low-cost options for improving the cooking situation of people. It's way cheaper than LPG, that is very widely promoted. It's even more cheaper than electric cooking or charcoal cooking, and that's why we believe there is really a big spot to do this. We also did some calculations. Is there enough biomass around to do that? And if you think about it, a household needs about 500 kilos of these pellets per year. A bit more than a kilo per day can take you through 2 hours of cooking. So that's typically what you would expect to need. And if you look what is available per capita, you find that everywhere in Africa, the available resources are larger than what is needed. I think with one single exemption, which was Botswana for any reason, which I don't know, but usually there is enough residuals there to do that. That was it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Stefan. I think we're gonna have your colleague Sihan Asfak, right? And then we have more questions in the open questions.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, again, my mistake here. We had so many last-minute changes, but we're gonna jump to Hello, Stefan. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sorry, yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Super, wonderful.
Welcome to COP.
So, you have my slides which you can show?
Yes, can you see them?
I can maybe speak in the meantime when you can hear me. So my name is Stefan Xenger. It's my pleasure to be with you. I'm kind of climate friendly in my office in Bonn without traveling, but of course I'm still a bit jealous that all of you people can meet there. Let me introduce myself. I'm Secretary General of the World Wind Energy Association, and I'm also one of the founders. Actually, this side event has a tradition because it's been hosted by, we call each other the International Renewable Energy Alliance, which is an alliance of solar, bioenergy, you heard, also hydro, geothermal, and wind energy. And we, for the first time, met in 2004 at the Bonn Renewables 2004 conference, and we had since that time almost at every COP we had a joint side event like today. And please give me a signal if my slides are there, because
okay, global market status.
Want to, although I mean my colleague Dishan will be the very last speaker, but I want to present you, and I thought that it's worthwhile to present this also in this virtual way, the annual statistics, or semi-annual, the half-year statistics in the case of wind power. Yes. Wind power has become one of the drivers of this global transition to renewable energy, which I think is the only way that makes sense. We heard just someone who spoke about nuclear power. Just please have a look at France and the nuclear crisis there. that brings whole Europe, draws whole Europe into crisis, because the main reason why Europe has so high power prices, not so much scarcity of gas, but France, more than half of the nuclear power plants are not in operation. And France has a very big problem, needs to import from the rest of Europe. Fortunately, there's a lot of wind, for example, in Germany, also in Spain, which can provide the energy to, and the electricity in particular, to France. So I wanted to update you on where we are globally with wind power. Can you see the slides? Because I don't see the
global market status.
Sorry for that. Okay, so what we see is we made a survey amongst our member associations, and what we have come out with is that there is a strong market growth. So we asked for the installation numbers in June 2022. We have come to an added capacity in the year 2022, in the first 6 months, of almost 29 gigawatt, which brings the capacity by the middle of the year to 874 gigawatt. And when you look at, unfortunately now, I cannot see what slides you have on the, which slides you are showing. Is it the
Expected
growth?
Global markets, expected install capacity, end of 2022.
Okay, it's then to the next, please, the annual capacity additions, where you can see how strong the wind power market was growing over the last 10, 11 years. Here you see that we had a record last year with around 100 gigawatt. No, please go back. Now I see that is good, but please go back.
There.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So you see this is the added capacity each year, and what you see here is indeed that there's been a strong growth last year with around 100 gigawatt, and this year, based on the survey that we've just made, we expect at least 110 gigawatt of additional installed capacity worldwide. So if you go to the next slide, please.
Yes.
Yeah, so that is what we now expect, 110 gigawatt new capacity, which means it's more than 955 gigawatt of global installed capacity, which covers around, I'd say, 8% of the global electricity demand. If you go to the next slide, please.
Yes.
Here you see the countries, and the leader by far has been China for many, many years. China again sees a bigger growth in 2022 than 2021. So for China, we can expect more than 56 gigawatt of added installed wind power capacity throughout the year. But in general, as you see, strong markets, also some European markets like Spain, will see very robust growth, so that global installed capacity will certainly be at 955 gigawatt by the end of the year. And if you go to the last slide, we expect that we will have, around middle of 2023. That's certainly something to celebrate, 1 million megawatt of wind power throughout the world. Let me underline that what I've presented here is still an impact of old policies. So the impact of the current energy crisis that we have caused by the Russian war against Ukraine is not yet kind of reflected in those installations. We know that many governments have now started additional supporting policy frameworks. So we expect that there will be additional momentum which will be visible from next year on. So please, we can really be confident, although the implementation rate is not yet fast enough when we look at the global challenge that we have, but for sure we are on a very positive path. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to my colleague Zishan Ashfaq, who works from Pakistan. And Zishan, you have a slightly different angle, and I'll be happy to now hear from you what you have to say and how we see the wind power market now and in the future. Thank you very much for your attention from my side.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you, Lydia. Stefan has just presented that we have seen a 13% growth in wind power deployment throughout the world in the first half of this year compared to the previous one, that indicates that the wind power has a very important role to play in the energy transition and also in the long-term energy supply. And it also highlights that we are moving in the right direction. However, that is not enough, and this deployment and installation must be on a massive scale for us to secure our energy supply and also to reach our climate goals. And latest geopolitical situation in Europe has again put a spotlight on the urgent need to reinforce security of supply, reduce energy dependency, and shield against the market disruptions caused by higher prices globally. And we have again realized, and we have learned rather the hard way, that fossil fuels are characterized by scarcity, while renewables are abundantly available. Fossil fuels are concentrated in a few areas. That's why they are a serious risk to the security of supply, whereas renewable sources are available in various geographies, and they are dispersed geographically. And this price volatility that we have seen recently, it has put power supply of many countries on risk. We are seeing that countries like Pakistan, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand are competing with the countries like Japan and Germany to secure gas supplies in order to power homes and industry. And this shows you the seriousness of the problem linked with the fossil fuels, because the choices of energy in the West has simply priced out some of the developing countries from the energy equation, and securing gas supply to power homes and industries has simply become unaffordable for developing countries, and that provide developing countries with another reason to switch towards a renewable energy future that is secure and that is better for the health of our planet. But developing countries also face with the number of challenges, because it's not easier for them to basically transition away from the fossil fuel-based system to renewables one, because the technology is mainly concentrated in a few pockets, and there are certain other issues that hinder renewable energy growth in the developing world. But in order to take this transition forward, the developing countries must step up, and they need to remove permitting hurdles that are basically slowing the growth of wind and other renewable energy deployment in those countries. And these unnecessary bureaucratic hurdles are the main main block towards this sustainable power supply. And other than that, they are also faced with limited financial capacities. I come from Pakistan, and the total wind installed capacity in my country is just over 2 gigawatt, and all the projects that are operating in Pakistan were either financed by the local commercial banks or development finance institution. We don't see any commercial international banks lending to wind power or solar power projects in a country like Pakistan. So such avenues must be opened, and these international commercial banks must be risk averse and start investing in developing countries like Pakistan and others. Another issue is of the policy barriers and the unexpected change in rules cause huge problems for renewable energy deployment, and that must be avoided in order to take this transition forward. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there is another issue which is of transfer of technology, because technology right now is concentrated in a few countries, and there must be a transfer to different regions, because this concentration is a characteristic of fossil fuels. Renewables are dispersed geographically, therefore the availability of technology should also be in various regions, and such practices would ensure sustainable supply chain, and it would also reduce geopolitical risks that are currently associated with fossil fuels, and such practices would create new job opportunities, and it will open additional economic avenues for the developing countries. So these are some of the barriers that the developing world is facing, and we must remove these barriers to make this transition happen, and we should in the future focus on the power system that is powered by 100% renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Robert, Mohammed, Christian, and Sishan. And on video, we have Stefan. We would like to have just one question, and this is simply because we have heard this the last 2 weeks. When will you think, what would you like to say to the world leaders directly to address these things? We know that they have included already the renewables, clean tech, as well as all the technologies, including long-duration energy storage in the international dialogues. We saw it also happening yesterday, announcements in the last 2 days from the US, the EU, and recently also from the G20, and I think yesterday also Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, also mentioned the same things. But there is a question that always pops up from the politicians and people that are obviously trying to change this and to help. So what will you tell them, how we can do it from your perspective, and how can you put the solution to that challenge in whatever you consider that they want to hear, or they need to hear, not want, they need.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been working in energy policy for, believe it or not, over 40 years. And that's a huge challenge to get past politics, financing, et cetera, and the real need. But my focus in the last decade or so has been in developing countries. And that is really the major focus we need globally for those countries to, I like to say, so developing countries don't do it like we did, my generation, my country. We really need to make sure that they develop appropriately clean energy, and of course the financing policies and so on are so important there. But that would be my main emphasis.
Thank you.
Sure. So having the hat of a company that is developing and installing on the ground, I think one of the main points that we see in all the markets is regulations. It's good to talk about numbers, goals, and everything, but without regulations in place in these countries that facilitate implementing these numbers and reaching these numbers, we will never reach the numbers that are planned. So this is one of the major and crucial points that we see in a lot of developing countries, where it's not easy or impossible to implement larger numbers, capacities of projects that we are planning to implement. Thank you.
I would say one of the real barriers that our sector is exposed to is changing policies. So the instability of policies is an incredible challenge to companies because they keep changing the level of subsidy. Germany, last year 50%, this year 20%, plus some additional requirements that cannot be easily met. It creates an up and down situation for industry that is extremely difficult and that does not allow a consistent growth that we need. So establish stable conditions, don't change conditions, and establish conditions that allow rapid growth. That's my recommendation.
Thank you.
Well, in my opinion, the market development and the energy transition must be inclusive and participatory. Local players must be given an additional chance to be in this energy transition, and local communities should be at the heart of this energy transition, and there should be dispersion of socio-economic benefits. You know, we should simply not focus on the deployment only, but we should also look at additional goals of job creation, you know, creating local value chains and benefiting local communities and dispersing those, you know, benefits locally. So this should be at the heart of the problem.
Thank you. Stefan, would you like to contribute?
Yes, of course. Thank you for that question, which is a very good one. I would say, yeah, please be serious to the decision makers because renewables are ready. We are cheap. We are cost competitive. There is no doubt. But there's a lot of nice talks, but there's so many barriers. So just remove the barriers. Remove the barriers. It cannot be that a planning, permitting process for a wind farm takes 7, 8, in some countries more than 10 years. There's no need. And at the same time, we just got LNG, new terminals, infrastructure. Permission was done in weeks. So we are still in the process of the politicians are saying the opposite, that there are new subsidies, new privileges for fossil, also nuclear, and more barriers against renewables. Remove that. We do not have a cost problem. We have a finance problem in the developing world. That needs to be overcome. But otherwise, if the barriers are removed, then renewables will take over. Then there is no doubt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to give a little recap, so what we can take right now from this is policy consideration and instruments, policy stability, market inclusion, remove barriers, and basically listen and act, right? So I think we ran out of time. Oh, no, sorry, we still have 5 minutes for questions and Q&A if someone in the audience would like to. Is there is a question for our amazing panel? Yes.
Comment and a question. So Caitlin Hughes, Executive Director with Solar Cookers International. I just want to say thank you to the International Solar Energy Society for being collaborators with us, being a strong partner, doing the exhibit booth with us, and we're so thankful to be a member with ISES and work together on so many different things, including a recent publication from Solar Cookers International and one of your great publications. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. We still have one more question option if someone would like to have an opportunity to ask. No? Well, we take 30 seconds extra for ourselves, and thank you very much for being here. And please, applause for this amazing panel and the wisdom they have shared today.
communicated it.
Yeah, okay.